I would have been talking while I was trying to do some slide stuff, but I find I'm one of those people that can't chew gum and walk. Well, thank you for attending our very first session here of webinars on estate planning. I'm thrilled that we've got some people here today. I thought, oh dear, nobody will come, but here you are. And I would like to join Emily in saying welcome. She is the extension agent in Fergus County, as I mentioned, and that's in Lewistown for those of you that aren't familiar with the center of the state. My name is Marcia Getting, and I'm the Family Economics Specialist for MSU Extension. And both Emily and I are a part of the land grant mission where we take information out to people. And I'm so used to being out there in the public that it's very difficult for me to just look at a camera and say, hi. And I decided I have a solution. What I'm going to do is pretend that I have an audience. And I have an example here of Butte, Montana. And it was a couple of years ago, but it's always stuck in my mind because it's not often as a speaker you have standing room only. So you see the two arrows there. There were a couple of people that actually stood for that 2 hours. And we had a couple of people in the green arrows that were sitting over there on the floor. So I'll pretend that you're really paying attention, right? Now, how about estate planning? You know, we have lots of different kinds of definitions out there. I hear succession planning, transfer planning, and this is the official one that's in a dictionary. And one of the things that I've noticed, and I've been guilty of this myself, of using the term assets. I'm always talking about all the money or the property and things like that you have. Well, estate planning is really more than that. It's really legacy planning. And I suppose as I think about my folks who have passed away in the past few years, I am more concerned about legacy planning because it's those values that your parents and grandparents taught you. It's your aspirations, it's memories that you want to leave behind for your friends, family, and not only immediate family, but distant relatives. So I decided, well, if I was going to talk about legacies, what kinds of things would come to mind? And one that I'm thinking about is family reunions that have been held in this one family since 1925. And then I noticed there was this circle on this old photograph because it was one that I found after my parents had passed away. And lo and behold, there was a blue circle, which I've now made red, around a lady. And when I looked at that, I go, oh my gosh, that's my grandma way back in 1925. Then my dad always had stories about harvesting broom corn. And so I found a photograph of him there. And that's one thing about my dad. He was hardworking. And when I ask people about legacies in Montana, they want to be recognized and say their legacy as a hardworking Montanan. Now, I don't know if any of you out there grew up in Kansas or ever passed by there, but this is an example of a shot in 1935, and it was called Black Sunday. And that was a part of the legacy that my aunt talked about, my dad talked about, and how you could not see your hand in front of your face. It was a time to behold. And now when we go back home, now I see those hills and I better understand, those are the sand dunes from the dirty 30s. Now, for other families, it's a golden wedding anniversary. And these are my grandparents. And on the left, I have my dad's side of the family, and on the right, my mom's side. Now, if you take a look at those, I'm going to bet that you're going to say the lady on the left really looks older. Well, they were the same age at the time this was taken. But my response to you is you would be feeling and looking that old if you had 16 kids. So here's the family when my dad was a young man. You can see he was courted towards the end. He was the younger one. And then they all grew up. And what a family they've had too, with all the family reunions that are still going on. And then the other thing about my dad, he was a part of the silent generation. And I'm sure those of you out there that have a dad or a grandpa that was a part of that generation, you probably didn't hear that much about what went on. Well, once my dad had married or he didn't marry, I did. I married a Vietnam era veteran. And I found out he and my dad had conversations about what went on, and I never knew about those. And he would say, did you know your dad was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross? And I go, well, what's that? Oh, it was really interesting. And then we have the untold legacy of the 1881 bell. This is something that we found in the house when we were ready to sell it. And I asked my two sisters, what's the story behind this bell? We don't know. It's an untold legacy because inside there's a scratch of 1881, but their story's not there. Now, in my audiences, people say it sure does look like a school bell, and I would tend to agree with that. But wouldn't it have been neat if mom or dad, wherever it came from, had had the story that they could have shared with the next generation? So one of the things I like to do is ask for people to share a legacy that they would like to leave when they're gone. So up until March 16th, I was out there, Sydney, Glendive, Forsyth. Oh, I was having a great time. And then bang, we can't do it anymore. But I thought we could do it the WebEx way. And so instead of putting your legacy in a bag, what you're going to do is write in the chat panel. And what I'm going to do is give you 2 minutes to type in one legacy that you want to be remembered for. Now, no one is going to know what you wrote except us, and we won't be able to, it's not like we're going to shout that out to anybody. But I'd like for you to share that with us. And if you would please, I'm going to give you 2 minutes in that chat room. And I'm starting the timer now. Well, Emily, this is kind of cool. I don't know if it's happening on your screen, but I'm having something pop up now and then with people's different legacies that they want to leave. Are you seeing those?
Yeah, we've got some pretty neat ones coming in.
Hey, yeah, we've got to share some of those.
So one of the ones I've seen come up is that they want to leave the legacy of not leaving any bills for their families to pay, having strong family values, being remembered as a hardworking and effective extension agent, being remembered for the books I've written, the teams I've coached, loving my kids, Montana 4-H Foundation Hall of Famer, as a minister's wife, being remembered for their faith and their love, art.
Yeah, these are great. And when I've had these on little pieces of paper, I sure wish that one of the things I've done is hold on to all of those because wow, it's really neat to look out there and see people. Our 2 minutes are up. So are there any others that you would like to share, Emily, that sound kind of special to you?
There's just a lot that have come up. Somebody said love of their grandkids and watermelon, which is kind of unique. Somebody said being remembered for their Basque heritage, the daughter of a working farmer and rancher, having no kids of their own, but wanting to be remembered as a great role model for their nieces and nephews. Lots of really cool things coming in.
Well, thank you very much for sharing. And see, that just goes to prove that estate planning is these other things as well, because it's more than those assets. And we've got an audience enhancement tool. That's what I'm calling the poll panels. And Emily, would you quickly describe how to use one of those? Yeah.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself there. So in just a moment, you're going to see a poll show up on the right side of your screen. I'll show you what that looks like right now. Do you want me to open that, Marcia?
Sure, let's do that. And let's let them tell us, when did you last review your estate plan?
So you should be seeing something pop up on the right side of your screen that gives you multiple choice. And if you click on your choice there, there's a submit button at the bottom. Make sure that you hit that after you've selected your answer. If you're on a phone, remember you might have to click those 3 dots at the bottom and then click on the polling screen to get there.
Okay, let's see what the results are, Emily.
Okay. So if you haven't submitted it, it's probably giving you a reminder to do so. So now you should be able to see those results. They're all anonymous, of course, but it just gives us an idea of what folks answered as a whole.
Okay, I can take a look here, and I don't know if you can see it on your screen, but we've got 40% of you that are saying you don't have an estate plan. Now, you're the ones I'm probably going to yell at just a little bit, because if you think you don't have an estate plan, you're really, really wrong, because Montana has one for you. If you haven't written a will, the state of Montana is going to step in and say, this is how we think the property should be distributed. And we've got some that looked at it in the last year, 13% of you, that's really good. That's good, we'll pat you on the back. But we've got some people that said more than 10 years ago. Now let's look at our family situation and say, gee, have there been some changes in this family during the last 10 years? And maybe we need to update. So what I'm going to suggest that we do is we're going to take a look and see what Montana is going to do for the 60% of you that said you don't have you don't have an estate plan. So the second enhancement tool that I'm going to use is wildflower names. Now let me say that again, wildflower names. And this sounds, I know, a little dorky, but we were on our way to Kansas, and I was talking about my estate planning meetings just seem to be drab lately. And so what could I do to make those more exciting? And I was folding some cards and doing things, and I started thinking of the wildflower names. And I thought, I think I got it. I'm going to try it out. So they're triggers. What we're going to use are these names as triggers to help you remember some of the strategies that is going to make your legacy planning successful. And I do need to make a disclaimer. No wildflowers were picked, stomped on, or destroyed to make these photographs included in the session. Because what I found people were doing, they thought I was going out there picking them and bringing them into a studio because they have a black background. And no, I used black velvet behind it. So there. Now, anytime you see this pine drop, and that's what it is, but it's shaped like a question mark. So when I saw that, I yelled at my husband, stop the truck! I got to take this picture. That's a trigger to write your questions in the chat panel. And as a bonus for today, what we're going to do is stay on for about 30 minutes after the webinar so that we can answer questions that you may have. Now, this is our first flower, and I'd love to give you time to tell me the name, but I'm going to give it to you. It's called a steer's head. So what I want to do is steer you towards an awareness of Montana's plan for the transfer of your property when you die. And these are the bitter roots, right? You can recognize those right away. They're a Montana state flower. But what that reminds me of is the bitterness that can result from lack of planning. Because again, Montana's going to step in and do it. And so if we look at the Bitterroot family, we could say we've got mom and dad, we've got 3 kids, and the state of Montana, oh, we have a poll question. We're going to look and say, how is the property going to be divided? And I'll give you a choice here pretty soon. When dad dies, fractions. You can say 1/3 to mom, and then 2/3 among their children, 1/2 to mom, and 1/2 equally among their kids, all to mom, or all to the kids. So quickly tell me how you think the state of Montana is going to divide that property. So check A, B, C, or D, and you have a 25% a chance being right. Okay, Emily, what do we got? So I thought I'd maybe fooled you, but I didn't fool everybody, did I? Because the majority of you are thinking that it is all to mom, and you are super right. You see, I asked that question because we used to have a law that said 1/3 to mom and 2/3 among the children. So that is good for you guys because mom gets it all. And that could be perfectly fine. However, there could be the chance, if this was a young couple, that mom would remarry. And then mom would put the property in joint tenancy with right of survivorship with her new husband. And then when mom dies, he gets everything and the children don't get anything. So it's just something to be aware of. And the third, a third is the way it would be if mom dies. Okay, so we treat the children equally. That's Montana way. However, Montana law doesn't consider family circumstances. You can take a look here and we see we've got a child with Down syndrome, we've got an investment advisor, and we've got a high school teacher. And between the two that are employed, there's a vast amount of difference in the amount of money that they have. And the Down syndrome child, if he or she inherits more than $2,000, then they're not eligible to live in a group home. There's other kinds of consequences. So this mom and dad needs to take a look at a special needs trust or a self-sufficiency trust for the child that has Down syndrome. Now let's look at what happened to the Bitterroot family in the 90s. You know, they get married, they've got kids, the kids get married, and then the parents are blessed with grandchildren. And that's the way many of your families may have looked at some point in time. And you could draw a family tree just like this to show your situation. But this family started having bad things happen. We had a son that was killed in an airplane crash in western Montana. We had a daughter in 2005 that was killed in a car accident in eastern Montana. Then grandpa, or the dad or the husband here, he passed away as a result of a stroke. So the person that was remaining is grandma, and grandma died in 2010. So we've got the remaining relatives, and this is your chance to be the state of Montana again as far as the legislature. I'm pointing to a grandchild D, and I want to know what fraction, if any, do you think this child is going to receive? What fraction, if any? So you can say nothing, 1/6, 1/8, and 1/9. So tell us what you think. Okay, we're going to hurry it because I see I'm already running short of time. So Emily, let us know what the response is there. Oh my goodness, very interesting. We've got 51% of you that are mean because you're not going to give that grandchild anything. And yeah, I think that's a little bit mean. And you know, if you were grandma and grandpa, you've answered this, that the answer was only got right by what, 6%? Well, it's a ninth. And you're looking at that saying, well, why would the Montana law give these kids a ninth? We've got two, the peak children get 0, and we've got another kid over here that gets a third. My goodness, what's wrong with these people? Well, the state of Montana has a concept, and that concept is called right of representation. Now, what does that mean? Well, let's take the example of mom and dad, grandma and grandpa. How many kids did they have? They had 3. 1, 2, 3. Now, true, 2 of them were deceased when mom died, but their children get to take the share they would have received had they been living. So that's why we've got the son over here with the turquoise gets a third, his child gets the third, not the wife, just the child. And then the 2 pink children don't receive anything because their dad is the one that received it. So this is a right of representation concept. And those of you that are sitting there thinking, well, I've got a will, it doesn't matter. I would advise you, take a look at that will. What does it say? Does it say your property is going to be divided by right of representation? And if so, you've got the same plan that the state of Montana does. Now, I'm not saying that this is bad, But I'm saying if grandma and grandpa up there had the objective to treat their grandchildren equally, they certainly haven't achieved that, have they? And then if this child is under age 18, we've got an additional problem because we need to appoint a conservator to manage the money for that child. Now, who do you think would be appointed as conservator? Well, most of my audience would say, oh, it's got to be the wife. Right. But what if we don't like that wife? What if she's a gambler? What if she's an alcoholic or has some sort of drug challenge? Well, then if we'd have written a trust, then we could have provided for that child and maybe had the son that was alive to look over that. Or maybe grandma would simply write a will, and what she's going to do is just leave all of her assets to a nonprofit, which might be a local or the Montana Community Foundation. So as parents and grandparents, you've really got to examine this right of representation in your family and see if that's something that you want to do. So if you have further questions, make sure you write those in the chat panel. Now I've got larkspurs. We're going to take a look at the larkspur family, but I had one lady say I shouldn't use it in my presentations because it's toxic. Well, I knew that, but I like it because it means toxic family relationships. So let's see how these toxic relationships can develop in some families. Here's the larkspur family. Everybody is alive, mom and dad, all the brothers and sisters and the nieces and nephews. And if bachelor brother dies, we need to think about who has priority. And most of you are going to know that it's mom and dad, of course. They're going to split it half and half. And if only one survives, then in this case, it would be dad that would receive everything. But of course, I've got to ask you a more complicated situation. I'm going to say that bachelor brother dies and mom and dad are deceased. What group has priority next? Well, I bet most of you say, I know that. It's the brothers and sisters. They each would receive 1/4. But that's not what happened with this family. What we've got there is equal, or what we call per capita. Now, here's another example. What happened is mom and dad are deceased. We have a brother in 220. He's the last to pass away. And what I've got is a lightning rod on the brother. Okay, and what we want to know is you get to be the Montana legislature. What are you going to give that brother? Are you going to give him all, 1/2, 1/4, or nothing? It'll all go to Montana because he wasn't married and he didn't have children. So let me know your response real quick, real quick. Okay, Emily, let's take a look at what people had to say. Okay, we've got some people that gave half. Oh my goodness, some people are even going to give it to the state of Montana. And then we had a lot of people without an answer. I must be rushing you. My apologies. We are going to move on because I want to share with you that it's 1/4. Now, I'm sure you're looking at that saying, why? Why would it be 1/4? Right of representation again. Let's look at the bachelor brother. How many brothers and sisters did he have? 4. Well, what that means then is the sister with a niece, that niece gets the share that the mom would have received. That's 1/4. And then we had another sister, they received 1/8. And what you've got in this family is some toxic relationships, because what does the niece want? Because she moved away long time ago to New York City, but she's back. She's happy to be with all the relatives. Oh, gag. Anyway, so what I would have advised the bachelor brother to do, even though I can't give legal advice, what I would have said, write a will and make sure you express what you want to do. And maybe what he wanted to do was leave all of his property to his favorite nonprofit organization. So that could have been the Montana 4-H Foundation, and you could designate it for the county that you happen to be in, whether it be up there in Liberty County, Richland County, wherever. So singles also need to take action and decide if they want to pass their property by right of representation. Then they can use the state of Montana. but I wanted to avoid some toxic family relationships. So don't forget, there's that pine drops that looks like a question mark to be sure and put those questions in the chat panel. Well, my observation from the lady slipper is time has certainly slipped away fast this morning. My goodness. And I hope I achieved my objective, and Emily's objective is to steer you towards an awareness of Montana's plan. You need to be aware of that. And if you don't have a memory like this cute little elephant's head, I hope you can see the ears and the trunk. If you don't have a memory like that, don't forget. Our fact sheets, which we call Mont Guides, are available online and also from your county extension office. Now, we'd like you to share some thoughts that you have about the webinar. So I'd like to thank you in advance for taking time to respond to those questions. So Emily, I see that you've got it up and it's really great. And she had this for me to fill out the other day, and I learned that what I needed to do was scroll down the side because I only answered 3 of the questions. So when you've done 1, 2, and 3, scroll down, use your scroll down bar, and pick up the others.
Okay, so as I'm going to leave that up for a while so you guys can answer those evaluation questions as you at your leisure. I think it's open for 7 minutes, so you have some time. You'll notice the first question on there asks if you want to be on our list to receive weekly reminders about these Tuesday tips. You can fill in your email at the top. You certainly don't have to, but we promise that email is not going to be shared outside of Marcia and I. It's just going to be used to send you those weekly reminders. But we did have a couple of questions come up, Marcia. So
okay.
The first one was when you were talking about the Bitterroot family. When it was mentioned that dad dies and all goes to mom, I may have misunderstood what happens when mom dies. Did she say it doesn't go to dad, it goes to kids?
Yeah, if we have a surviving spouse that passes away, then it's going to go down to the children. Now, if it's the one example I used where dad died and here's mom, the survivor, then mom receives it all. And then when she dies, it goes to the children by right of representation.
Okay, so then the other question we had come up, do half or step siblings have a share in right of representation?
Okay, this half-bloods inherit the same as whole bloods. And if the stepchildren were adopted, then they're treated as lineal descendants. But stepchildren that have not been adopted, no, they are not going to inherit it, which is another reason to write a will. If you have those children, you want to make sure that they're recognized. Now, we're going to, in some of these other seminars, look also at how the property's titled, because it's highly correlated. You know, there's the state of Montana law, and then there's the way that you have the property titled. And so we're going to get into that in one of our other seminars, get specific about it.
Okay, another question. So I have my property in joint tenancy, but I also have a will, so I should be good to go because I've got both of those, right?
Oh, I'm not going to say that. I wouldn't say good to go. What we need to make sure that we do is, does the will agree with what you have in joint tenancy? Let's say that Emily and I have property in joint tenancy with right of survivorship. Okay, and I write a will, and in my will, I say, I leave that to my husband, Gary. Not going to happen because it's in joint tenancy with right of survivorship with Emily. So when your attorney is writing your will, if he or she doesn't ask you about some of these other property titles and whether or not you have what we call pods, tods, and tods again, which we'll look at next week, you need to look at that really, really close, because the attorney could be writing a will that would be totally useless, and you would have paid a lot of money for something that's not helpful. Okay, let's take a look at those results. Emily, I can see I'm running over, and I apologize to the audience. We can get here real quick. You know,
do you want to see the results for this one right now, since it's just the evaluation? So
yeah, no,
do you just want to open it up for questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple of other slides here just to
Okay.
finish this off here. I wanted to talk or remind you next week, same time, same station, we've got Beneficiaries 101. Emily came up with that title, and I thought it was a really good one to share with you all. And the other thing I mentioned, we'll stay in this WebEx room for the next 30 minutes. And there's two ways that you can ask questions. One is you just as you're doing, typing the question in the chat panel. The other thing you can do is raise your hand. I have a question. We all remember first grade. And Emily's going to unmute your audio, and then you can ask the question. And then I also wanted to bring to your attention that some of you are going to say, this one's so fast. What did she say? Help, help. Well, we do have some helps. We have a mock guide, and MSU Extension has mock guides. I'm going to show you one here. Maybe you can see the little panel. This mock guide talks about dying without a will, and it has the most recent information from our situation with the legislative change last year. We also have an interactive website that you could go in and answer questions. Are you married? Yes, no. Do you have children? Yes, no. Do you have children from another marriage? It's just a really great website that was developed by my assistant, Carrie Hayes. And I tell you what, nobody else, no other state has something like this. And so I'm so proud of what Carrie did with this. Now, I need to go on. Let's see. We've done that. And we just want to extend to you our appreciation for your participation in these webinars. And if you have some friends, relatives that you think might be interested, encourage them to sign up and join us next week for Beneficiaries 101. So I'm going to stop sharing and just have Emily let me know what kind of questions we're having.
Okay, so we had another one come up in the chat. Someone asked, is there a will template available, and where would we file a will to make it valid?
Okay, here's the deal about writing a will. A lot of people think it's a legal document, which it is, but it doesn't have any impact until it's submitted for probate. So you don't file it anywhere. What you want to do is keep it on hand. Safe deposit box is good. Maybe keep a copy at home so that if you go to a meeting like this and you want to know is right of representation in there, you can pull out your copy and take a look at that. And maybe you had a really good attorney that explained it. But when I had my attorney trying to talk to me, I'm one of those that's very visual, as you can probably tell by the PowerPoints. And so once the attorney explained it with the boxes, I could understand. But before that, I just couldn't. Other questions?
Another question that has come up, just some more clarification on adopted children, stepchildren. So adopted children who have been officially adopted, do they count as part of the lineage for right of representation?
Right. If you have adopted children, they are treated as what I want to call your biological children. I don't like the word unnatural. But anyway, they are treated, and that's the same way then for the grandparents. If your children have adopted children, they are considering your little good grief, lineal descendants. So they inherit, but stepchildren do not unless they have been adopted.
Okay. Another question that's come up, do I have to hire a lawyer to write a will, and how do I ensure that my will is legal?
Okay, there are templates out there, no doubt, for writing a will. And we had an advertisement years ago where there was an attorney in a three-piece suit, and he was sitting down on the edge of the desk, and he was saying, oh, for only $19.99, you could have this will template. And that was kind of before the days of so many being available on the website. Well, I ordered the packet because I got questions about it. And I discovered what you got for your $19.99 are some fill in the blanks with your will. So I decided what I would do is to take it to the smart PhD people in my department. And I said, hey, do you know what this means? Right of representation. And no, they didn't. And my concern about a template is that, do you know what it means? Do you know what you're doing about the next generation and the next generation? Does that will say, well, if the both of you die, it goes here. But what if the children die too? Where do you want it to go with the next phase? So I think it's a good idea. Read our Mont guides that we've got. We've got one on writing a will. And even me, I have to say that what is called a holographic will is legal in Montana. Now, that is one that's in your handwriting only. So you can't have anything else on the paper. It's got to be totally in your handwriting. And those are submitted for probate. When it's submitted for probate, that's where its validity is determined. It goes to district court. District court takes a look at the will and says, yep, looks like everything's fine. And we go forth then. And the personal representative that you nominated in the will is the one that's going to take the actions that you indicated in your will. But don't forget, if you've got your property in joint tenancy with right of survivorship with someone else, that person gets it regardless of what the will says.
Okay, so another question then. So it sounds like joint tenancy overrides any will that I have written. Are there any other type of contracts or designations that would override my will?
Yep, glad you asked. That's next week's program, but in case you're not there for it, we got what is called payable on death designations that you can put on your checking account, savings accounts, and certificates of deposit. Once you declare a beneficiary payable on death, that becomes a contract. Now you can change it anytime you want to, but if you POD, like I was giving with the joint tenancy, hey, it's that person that's going to receive it, not what your will says. So what you're setting up in family sometimes is your will says one thing, your POD says another. Those family members get together and they start fighting over a result like that. Those of you that have stocks, bonds, and mutual funds can use transfer on death registrations. Those were passed by our legislature several sessions ago, and that allows you to name a beneficiary for your stocks and bonds. Now, some of you have already done that. You had a company that allowed you to do that. We had some companies that were doing business in Montana that weren't doing that. So the legislature said you have to offer a transfer on death registration. And then as a result of October 1, what we've got now is called a TOD, and it's TODD, and it stands for Transfer on Death Deed. Now, some of you may have heard of a beneficiary deed. That's what we had before. That was up until October the 1st, and then after the October 1st, we can use this transfer on death deed to decide who we want to have our property. You can have $6 million worth of property and use a TOD. And you're saying this is the person that you want to receive it. They can't do anything with it while you're alive. It's only when you're dead that they get to do that.
Okay. So I guess circling back to the question we had before, somebody still wants a little bit of clarification. How do I make sure that my will is legal? What does it need to have to make sure that it's actually legal?
Okay, there are some rules in Montana. For example, you must be age 18 or older to write a will. Okay, the other thing is that you must be of sound mind. And usually when I have a real audience, I look out there and say, well, yeah, we're all over 18, but the question about sound mind, we try to have a joke about it. And then the third requirement in Montana is that you cannot be under what is called undue influence. Now, initially, here I'm a Kansas moving to Montana, and I thought that had to do with alcohol. You couldn't sign a will when you were drunk or on drugs or some of that. But it's your ability to show the nature of your property and know those to whom you would leave it. And so that's another good reason to go to an attorney, because what an attorney is going to do is make sure that your will is self-proven. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means when you're there, the attorney has the witnesses right there too. And the witnesses are attesting that you were of sound mind when you signed it. So that's a solemn occasion. It's not the time to be a dingbat. The first time I signed mine, I was kind of embarrassing. And the attorney was kind of aggravated. And he said, they are here to determine if you're sound mind. And he says, you're acting so dingy, that's questionable. Well, it was nerves, and later on I knew how to do that. But those are the three things. And so if you're going to contest a will, then you have to prove the person was of unsound mind or undue influence was used. And, sure, there's cases out there, but it's kind of hard to prove those examples. Even a person in the early stages of Alzheimer's can write a will, because at that point they still know who they are, they know who their children are, and they know their assets. Now here I'm talking early stages. The late stages, no. And that's why, I'm kind of doing my work here as the Alzheimer work group, which is meeting at the same time, is they are coming forth with ideas on how we can help people that have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's so that they can do the necessary legal documents before it's too late. Sorry, I got a little off track there.
Okay, we had another question come in. So if the TOD or POD beneficiaries are biological children, would the current spouse who is not their parent have any rights to these accounts?
Oh, why don't somebody ask a simple question? That one is a tough one because on the books of Montana, there is a rule that you can't totally disinherit your spouse. So in other words, if we had a husband who used Pods, Todds, and the other Todd and left his wife penniless, she can go into the probate process and say, yo, look here, we have been married for 15 years. And as such, I get 50% of what they call the augmented estate. Now, the augmented estate it goes like this. It's everything that he owns, everything that she owns, and we attach dollar values to that, okay? So if the wife is going to get 50%, which includes hers plus, a little bit of his, we're going to divide that up, then she can say, hey, I get part of that. But if she's already walking away with 50% of the value, then that POD that we gave to the child or to a charity, for example, she can't go after that. It's only if she's been disinherited. It's Montana's way of saying we do not want to have to support that spouse. So that's why it's on the books.
Okay.